What started as an unauthorized wedding on a private dock ended with 23 people stranded in the middle of Lake Michigan, a viral TikTok video, and a courtroom battle that would expose the darkest secrets of two entitled sisters who thought they owned the world. Music fades to serene lakeside morning of June 15th, 2024. Began like any other for Marcus Thompson, a 34-year-old software engineer who had spent his life savings on a modest lakefront property in northern Michigan. The weathered wooden dock extending into the crystal-clear waters of Lake Huron had been his sanctuary for 3 years, a place where he'd fish at dawn, read in the evening, and find peace from the chaos of his demanding career. Marcus had purchased the property after his divorce, pouring every dollar of his settlement into what he called his slice of heaven. The dock wasn't much to look at, 50 feet of sun-bleached planks held up by sturdy pylons. But it was his. The property deed clearly marked the waterfront boundaries, and Marcus had even installed discreet private property signs at the shoreline. That Saturday morning, Marcus was 200 miles away in Detroit, attending his daughter's graduation ceremony. He'd been looking forward to this moment for months, watching his 18-year-old daughter Emma walk across the stage to receive her diploma. His phone buzzed constantly throughout the ceremony, but he ignored it, wanting to be present for this milestone. It wasn't until the reception that Marcus finally checked his messages. His neighbor, elderly Mrs. Patterson, had sent a series of increasingly frantic texts. Marcus, there are people setting up on your dock. They have tables and chairs now. Lots of cars. Someone in a wedding dress just arrived. They're blocking my driveway. Should I call someone? Marcus's blood ran cold as he scrolled through the messages. The timestamps showing the situation had been escalating for hours. He immediately called Mrs. Patterson. Marcus, thank God, she whispered into the phone. There must be 50 people here. They've got a whole wedding set up on your dock. I tried to tell them it was private property, but this woman, she was so rude. She told me to mind my own business and said they had permission. Marcus felt his heart racing. Did you get names? Did anyone show you paperwork? The bride's sister, I think. Blonde woman, very loud. She said her name was Karen Whitfield. She claimed they'd rented the space online. When I said that was impossible, she got nasty. Called me a bitter old woman who should stay inside. Marcus was already walking to his car. Mrs. Patterson, I'm leaving Detroit now. It's a 3-hour drive. Can you document everything? Take pictures, if you can safely do so. What Marcus didn't know was that Mrs. Patterson was already ahead of him. The retired librarian had been discreetly filming from her kitchen window, capturing every moment of the unauthorized wedding setup. Her granddaughter had taught her to use her iPhone's video function, and she was methodically documenting the trespass. The drive back to Lake Huron was the longest 3 hours of Marcus's life. His mind raced with questions. How had strangers found his property? Who had given them permission? The dock wasn't visible from any public road. Someone had to have specifically sought it out. As Marcus pulled into his driveway at 7:30 p.m. The scene before him defied belief. His private dock was transformed into a wedding venue. White fabric had been draped along the railings, creating an elegant backdrop against the lake. Round tables covered with crisp linens dotted the wooden platform, surrounded by chairs filled with wedding guests in their finest attire. A string quartet played softly as the sun began to set, casting golden light across the water. It was objectively beautiful. It was also completely illegal. Marcus approached the dock, his hands shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. The wedding party was in full swing, guests laughing, clinking glasses, taking photos. No one seemed to notice or care that they were trespassing on private property. He spotted Karen Whitfield immediately. She was holding court near the head table. A woman in her mid-30s with perfectly styled blonde hair and an expensive-looking dress. Her sister, the bride, was radiant in white, posing for endless photos with guests. "Excuse me," Marcus called out, his voice barely audible over the celebration. Karen turned, her expression immediately shifting to annoyance. "Can I help you? This is my dock. You're on private property." The laughter around them died as nearby guests turned to stare. Karen's face flushed red, but not with embarrassment, with indignation. "That's impossible," she said loudly. "We rented this space. I have the confirmation right here on my phone." Marcus felt dozens of eyes on him as Karen made a show of scrolling through her phone. "See, like here on wedding venue. We paid $3,000 for tonight." "That's a scam," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "I own this property. I never rented it to anyone. You need to leave immediately." Karen's sister, the bride, approached them, her wedding dress rustling against the dock planks. "What's going on? Why is this man harassing us? He claims he owns the dock," Karen said dismissively. "Obviously, he's trying to cause trouble." Marcus pulled out his phone, showing them his property deed and tax records. "I can prove ownership. You've been scammed by whoever took your money. But that doesn't give you the right to trespass." The bride's face crumpled as the reality of the situation began to sink in. This was supposed to be the perfect day, the culmination of months of planning and thousands of dollars in expenses. But Karen wasn't backing down. "We're not going anywhere," she declared. "We paid for this venue. We have guests here, and we're not ruining my sister's wedding because of some property dispute. If you really own this stock, you should have better security." Marcus stared at her in disbelief. "You're admitting you're trespassing and refusing to leave." "I'm saying we're staying until the reception is over. Sue us if you don't like it." Those words would echo in Marcus's mind for months to come, as he stood on his own property, surrounded by strangers celebrating an unauthorized wedding. He made a decision that would change all their lives forever. He turned and walked back to his house, leaving the wedding party to continue their celebration. But Marcus wasn't giving up. He was getting his bolt cutters. What happened next would become the most controversial dock incident in Michigan legal history, sparking a viral social media firestorm and dividing public opinion down the middle. Marcus Thompson stood in his garage, bolt cutters in hand, staring at the tool that would either vindicate his property rights or destroy his life. Through his window, he could see the unauthorized wedding in full swing on his dock. The sound of laughter and music drifted across his yard, a mockery of his explicit instructions for the trespassers to leave. His phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer, David Chen, whom he'd called during the drive home. "Marcus, whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. We can get an injunction tomorrow. Document everything and wait for legal process." But Marcus had already tried the legal approach. He'd called the county sheriff, only to be told that property disputes were civil matters and they couldn't remove the wedding party without a court order. He'd contacted the local police, who said the same thing. The system designed to protect his rights was failing him in real time. He walked to the edge of his property, bolt cutters hidden behind his back, and surveyed the scene one more time. The wedding party had grown, more guests had arrived, and the celebration was reaching its peak. Children ran along his dock while adults danced to the string quartet's music. Someone had even brought a professional photographer who was capturing every moment. Karen Whitfield spotted him approaching and intercepted him before he reached the dock. "Look, we can work this out," she said, her tone shifting to something resembling reasonableness. "The wedding's almost over. Give us 2 more hours, and we'll clean everything up. I'll even pay you something for the inconvenience." Marcus looked past her to the dock, seeing his property transformed into someone else's dream. "How much did you pay for this venue?" $3,000, Karen admitted. "Look, I know we got scammed, but my sister's wedding is ruined if we have to leave now. Can't you find it in your heart to be understanding?" "Understanding?" Marcus's voice rose. "You're asking me to be understanding about trespassing, about you refusing to leave my property when I asked politely, about you calling the police lies when you know you're in the wrong?" Karen's fake reasonableness evaporated. "Fine. Be a selfish prick. We're staying anyway. What are you going to do about it?" Marcus didn't answer. He simply walked past her, straight to the point where his dock connected to the shore. The connection was held by 4 large marine bolts, designed to allow the dock to be removed during harsh winter weather. He'd installed the system himself, never imagining he'd use it for this purpose. "What are you doing?" Karen demanded. Following him, Marcus knelt down and positioned the bolt cutters round the first connection point. "I'm exercising my property rights." "You can't be serious," Karen gasped. "There are people on that dock. Then you better get them off." The first bolt snapped with a metallic ping that seemed to echo across the water. The dock shifted slightly, causing several wedding guests to look round in confusion. Karen screamed at the top of her lungs, "He's cutting the dock loose. Everyone off." Now chaos erupted. The string quartet stopped playing mid-note. Wedding guests began rushing towards her, but Marcus was already cutting the second bolt. The dock lurched, causing several people to lose their balance. "Stop!" the bride shrieked, her wedding dress trailing behind her as she ran. "My wedding!" The third bolt snapped. The dock was now held to shore by only one connection, causing it to swing outward into the lake. Panic spread through the remaining guests as they realized the platform was moving away from land. Marcus paused before the final bolt, looking up at Karen. "Last chance. Admit you were wrong. Apologize for trespassing, and I'll stop." Karen's face was purple with rage. "You psychotic freak. You can't do this." The fourth bolt snapped. Marcus's dock, carrying 23 wedding guests, began drifting into Lake Huron. What followed was pure pandemonium. Some guests jumped into the shallow water near shore and waded to safety, ruining their formal attire. Others clung to the tables and chairs as the dock continued its journey into deeper water. The bride stood in the center of the platform, her wedding dress billowing in the lake breeze, screaming at anyone who would listen. But Karen Whitfield was already on her phone, not calling for rescue, but recording everything. "This is Karen Whitfield," she said breathlessly into her camera. "A psychotic property owner just set our wedding party adrift in Lake Huron. 23 people are stranded on a floating dock because this maniac couldn't wait for us to finish the reception." She posted the video to TikTok within minutes, and it immediately began going viral. The caption read, "Psycho neighbor destroys wedding by cutting dock loose with guests on it. Shared to expose this monster." Meanwhile, Marcus stood on his shoreline, watching his dock drift further into the lake. He felt a mixture of satisfaction and growing dread. He'd reclaimed his property, but at what cost? The Coast Guard arrived within 30 minutes. Alerted by multiple 911 calls, they easily towed the dock back to shore and helped the remaining guests disembark. No one was seriously injured, though several people were soaked and traumatized. The emergency responders cleared the scene. Sheriff Deputy Jana Morrison approached Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, I need to ask you some questions. Am I under arrest?" "Not yet. But cutting loose a dock with people on it, that could be considered reckless endangerment, maybe even assault." Marcus's heart sank as he realized the full implications of his actions. Karen's TikTok video was being shared thousands of times, painting him as an unhinged property owner who'd endanger innocent wedding guests. The comments were brutal. "This man is a sociopath. Imagine being so selfish you'd risk lives over a dock. He should be in prison." But there were other voices too. "Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Don't trespass, and this won't happen. Why didn't they just leave when he asked?" The story was picked up by local news, then national outlets. Marcus's face was plastered across social media platforms, both vilified and defended in equal measure. The dock vigilante had become a polarizing figure overnight. 3 days later, Marcus received a certified letter that would change everything. Karen and her sister were suing him for $2.3 million in damages, claiming emotional distress, property damage, and intentional infliction of emotional harm. The fight was just beginning. 6 months later, the case of Whitfield v. Thompson had become a legal circus that divided the nation. The courtroom in Traverse City, Michigan, was packed with media, legal observers, and curious locals who had followed the viral dock incident. From its chaotic beginning, Judge Patricia Hawkins presided over the civil trial, her stern expression making it clear that she wouldn't tolerate any grandstanding from either side. She'd already dealt with numerous pretrial motions, including Karen's attempts to exclude certain evidence and Marcus's countersuit for trespassing and defamation. The plaintiff's attorney, smooth-talking Robert Castellanos, approached the jury with the confidence of a man who believed he was fighting for justice itself. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Castellanos began, his voice resonating through the packed courtroom. This case is about a man who made a calculated decision to endanger 23 innocent people. Because his ego couldn't handle a simple property dispute, Marcus Thompson had numerous legal options available to him. But he chose violence. He clicked a remote, and Karen's viral TikTok video began playing on the courtroom's large screen. The jury watched in silence as the dock broke free from shore, carrying its terrified cargo of wedding guests into the lake. You'll hear testimony about the trauma inflicted on these innocent people, children who now have nightmares about drowning, a bride whose perfect day became a living nightmare, elderly guests who feared for their lives as they drifted helplessly into deep water. Castellanos paused dramatically, making eye contact with each juror. The defendant wants you to believe this was about property rights, but property rights don't give anyone the right to endanger human lives. This was about revenge, pure and simple. The first witness was the bride, Jessica Whitfield Morrison, who took the stand wearing conservative attire that contrasted sharply with the glamorous wedding dress from the viral video. "Tell us about your wedding day," Castellanos prompted gently. Jessica's voice trembled as she spoke. "It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. We'd saved for 2 years. Invited all our family and friends. When the dock started moving, I thought I was going to die. I couldn't swim very well, and I was wearing this heavy dress." She broke down in tears, and several jurors looked visibly moved. But when Marcus's attorney, David Chen, cross-examined Jessica, a different picture emerged. "Ms. Morrison, you testified that you feared for your life. But isn't it true that at no point were you in water deeper than 8 feet? I don't know exactly how deep it was. And isn't it true that there were multiple Coast Guard vessels in the area, and you were never more than a few hundred yards from shore?" "That's not the point," Jessica snapped. "We didn't know that at the time." Chen pulled out a photograph. "This is a picture from your wedding photographer, taken while you were on the dock. Does this look like the face of someone in mortal fear?" The photo showed Jessica laughing and posing for pictures. Even as the dock drifted, Karen Whitfield's testimony was the centerpiece of the plaintiff's case. She took the stand with the same confidence she displayed on that fateful wedding day. "We had every right to be on that dock," she declared. "We paid good money for a venue rental. Just because we got scammed doesn't mean we were trespassing." Castellanos walked her through the events, painting Marcus as an unreasonable aggressor who escalated a minor dispute into a dangerous situation. But Chen's cross-examination revealed Karen's true character. "Ms. Whitfield, you testified that you believed you had legal right to use the dock. But didn't you tell Mr. Thompson, and I quote, 'Sue us if you don't like it'?" Karen shifted uncomfortably. "I was upset. People say things when they're emotional. And when Mr. Thompson showed you his property deed and tax records, proving his ownership, what was your response?" "I thought they could be fake." Chen produced a document. "This is the supposed rental confirmation you showed Mr. Thompson, the email address it came from. Did you ever verify that this company actually existed?" Karen's face reddened. "We assumed it was legitimate." "You assumed. Did you do any research at all? Check reviews? Verify the business license?" "We were busy planning a wedding. Too busy to check if you were trespassing on private property." The most damaging moment came when Chen played audio from Mrs. Patterson's 911 call, which she'd made while filming the incident. 911. What's your emergency? There are trespassers on my neighbor's property, and they're refusing to leave. The property owner asked them to go, and they're being very aggressive about staying. Are they threatening anyone? The blonde woman told the property owner to sue them if he didn't like it. She's being very confrontational. Chen paused the audio. Ms. Whitfield, this call was made before Mr. Thompson cut the dog loose. It shows that neighbors were aware you were trespassing and being confrontational. Doesn't this contradict your portrayal of events? But the real bombshell came during the third day of testimony, when Chen called an unexpected witness, Derek Zimmerman, a digital forensics expert. Mr. Zimmerman, did you analyze the defendant's social media activity following this incident? Yes, I did. I discovered that Ms. Karen Whitfield had created multiple fake social media accounts to amplify negative coverage of Mr. Thompson. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Karen's face went pale. Can you elaborate? She created at least 12 fake Facebook and Twitter accounts, all posting variations of the same message calling Mr. Thompson a psychopath and a danger to society. She also coordinated with FAMI Lime members to leave fake negative reviews on Mr. Thompson's business websites. Chen displayed screenshots of the fake accounts. This represents a systematic campaign to destroy Mr. Thompson's reputation and livelihood, doesn't it? Objection. Castellanos jumped up. This is character assassination, Your Honor. Chen responded calmly. This goes to damages. The plaintiffs claim they suffered reputation harm, but the evidence shows they engaged in a deliberate campaign to harm my client's reputation. Judge Hawkins allowed the testimony to continue. The final revelation came when Chen called Marcus's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who had been quietly filming the entire incident from her kitchen window. Mrs. Patterson, did you capture the moment when Mr. Thompson asked the wedding party to leave? Yes, I have it all on video. Chen played the footage, which clearly showed Marcus's polite initial request, Karen's aggressive refusal, and her explicit statement that they wouldn't leave regardless of his property rights. But the most damaging moments show Karen after the dock had been cut loose and while Coast Guard boats were approaching, laughing and telling someone off camera, "This is going to make us famous. We'll own this guy's house when we're done suing him." The courtroom fell silent as the implications sank in. The trial was far from over, but the momentum had clearly shifted. The final day of the Whitfield v. Thompson trial arrived amid a media frenzy that had transformed a local property dispute into a national conversation about entitlement, property rights, and the viral nature of modern justice. Judge Hawkins called the court to order as the packed courtroom held its collective breath. The jury had deliberated for just under 6 hours, a relatively quick decision for such a complex case. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Hawkins asked. The jury foreman, a retired teacher named Michael Rodriguez, stood with a folded paper in his hand. "We have, Your Honor." Karen Whitfield sat rigidly beside her attorney, her usual confidence replaced by barely concealed anxiety. Across the aisle, Marcus Thompson gripped his lawyer's arm, 6 months of legal battles and public scrutiny weighing heavily on his shoulders. On the count of negligent infliction of emotional distress, Rodriguez read, his voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. We find in favor of the defendant, Marcus Thompson. Karen's sharp intake of breath was audible in the quiet room. On the count of intentional infliction of emotional harm, we find in favor of the defendant, Marcus Thompson. On the count of property damage, we find in favor of the defendant, Marcus Thompson. Castellanos closed his eyes as his $2.3 million lawsuit crumbled with each verdict. Furthermore, Rodriguez continued, on the defendant's counterclaim for trespassing, harassment, and defamation, we find in favor of the defendant, Marcus Thompson, and award damages in the amount of $847,000. The courtroom erupted. Karen Whitfield's face went white as the full impact hit her. Not only had she lost her lawsuit, but she now owed Marcus nearly $1 million. But Judge Hawkins wasn't finished. Mr. Thompson. Ms. Whitfield, please approach the bench as the attorneys and their clients gathered before her. Judge Hawkins's expression was grave. During this trial, evidence has emerged that suggests possible criminal conduct beyond the scope of this civil case. Ms. Whitfield, your social media campaign against Mr. Thompson, combined with your admitted refusal to leave private property after being asked, may constitute criminal harassment and stalking under Michigan law. Karen's legs nearly gave out. Castellanos studied her as the judge continued, I am referring this matter to the prosecutor's office for potential criminal charges. Additionally, the court has discovered some information that was not presented during this trial. Chen looked puzzled. This was news to him. Judge Hawkins produced a manila folder. 3 days ago, my office received a package from someone who wishes to remain anonymous. It contains financial records and communications that shed new light on this case. She opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Ms. Whitfield, these are your personal financial records, obtained through legitimate discovery channels after your sister filed for bankruptcy last week. Karen's sister Jessica had been sitting in the gallery, but Marcus noticed she was no longer there. These records show that you, Ms. Whitfield, were facing foreclosure on your home. Your credit cards were maxed out, and you were desperate for money. The rental fee of $3,000 for the dock venue, it never existed. Gasps filled the courtroom as the judge continued her revelation. According to these documents, you created the fake rental listing yourself. You took money from your sister and her fiancé under false pretenses, knowing full well that you were planning to use someone else's private property without permission. Castellanos looked stunned. Your Honor, I had no knowledge of this. I believe you, counselor. But it gets worse. The records show that Ms. Whitfield researched Mr. Thompson's property specifically, using public records to find a dock owner who would likely be away during the wedding weekend. Karen was now visibly shaking. Furthermore, there's evidence that you planned to live stream the confrontation, hoping to create viral content that could be monetized. Your social media accounts show you've been researching viral lawsuit payouts and property dispute settlements for weeks before the wedding. The courtroom was in absolute silence now. But here's the most disturbing part. Judge Hawkins continued, your sister Jessica knew nothing about this scheme. She genuinely believed you had legitimately rented the venue. She was as much a victim of your fraud as Mr. Thompson was. Marcus felt his world shift. The bride who testified against him had been manipulated by her own sister. Ms. Whitfield, you orchestrated this entire situation, planning to force a confrontation, create viral content, and then sue for damages. You turned your sister's wedding into a con game. Karen finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. That's not. I didn't mean for. The evidence suggests otherwise. You have the right to remain silent, as criminal charges are likely forthcoming. As court security approached Karen, Judge Hawkins delivered her final judgment. Mr. Thompson, while your method of resolving this trespass was unorthodox and potentially dangerous, you were defending your property against a deliberate scheme designed to defraud and exploit you each. However, I cannot and will not endorse cutting loose occupied structures. You were lucky no one was seriously injured. She turned to address the courtroom. This case should serve as a reminder that our actions in the digital age have consequences far beyond what we might anticipate. Social media can amplify both justice and injustice, truth and lies, with equal vigor. As Karen was led away in handcuffs, Marcus felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion. The viral video that had made him a villain to millions would now be seen in a different light, but the damage to his reputation and peace of mind was already done. Outside the courthouse, Marcus was surrounded by reporters shouting questions. He paused at the top of the steps, looking out at the crowd of cameras and microphones. I want to say something to Jessica Morrison, he said, his voice carrying across the plaza. I'm sorry your wedding was ruined. You deserved better from your sister, and you deserved better from me. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us both. As Marcus walked away from the courthouse, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Thompson, this is Jessica. Thank you for your words today. I'm sorry for what my sister did to you. I'm filing for divorce from her actions and starting over. Would you be willing to accept a genuine apology over coffee sometime? Marcus smiled for the first time in months. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected forms. 6 months later, Karen Whitfield pleaded guilty to fraud and harassment charges, receiving 2 years probation and community service. Her viral video was removed from most platforms, but the internet never forgets. Marcus sold his lakefront property and bought a small cabin in the mountains, far from any social media influence. And Jessica, she started a nonprofit helping victims of family fraud, turning her painful experience into a force for good. The dock incident became a cautionary tale about the intersection of property rights, social media, and family betrayal. But it also proved that sometimes the truth does emerge, even when it's not the truth anyone expected to find. The real question remains, in our connected world, where viral videos can destroy lives in minutes, how do we balance justice with the power of the crowd? That's a question still being debated in courtrooms and comment sections across the country. And somewhere in those mountains, Marcus Thompson is fishing from a dock that belongs only to him. Finally, at peace with the choppy waters of modern justice. If you're still here, I'd really like to know what this reminded you of or what you would have done in my place. And hey, if this story hits something in you and you want to support the channel, That little thanks button's always there. Thanks for hanging out. We're HOA Headache Stories, and this is just one of many unbelievable tales. Catch more by checking out the next video. We promise it's even wilder.